we're back with chats about improv.
And we will have a chat with Patti about how much structure is too much structure in improv. Talking about freedom and improvise freely, there are a lot of formats in improv. Yeah, it could be long form, could be the Harold, Armando. Yeah. So these are structures improvisers have to work in. Are these structures okay, or can they be too much?
Both. Structures that help to inspire improvisers to take risks, to work together, are useful. Structures that confine improvisers, put them in their head, and make them obedient to a process, not so useful, in my opinion. So the Herald's actually a great example because there's the structured Herald and the non-structured Herald, or the organic Herald, or the original Herald. There's a lot of different terms, and I'll admit I'm not a Herald expert. I wasn't trained by Dell. I wasn't trained in Chicago. But from my experience in Herald and my research of Herald, it's really interesting the difference between the structured Herald and the unstructured. And when I watch interviews where Dell is talking about the Herald, it's not from a place of over-structuring it. There's components that he talks about, but even within those components, there's an element of the jazz. Let's see what happens. In one interview, I remember he's going, and then at the end, we kind of, we would just find what it was. There's an exploration process there. And when I watch some of the structured Heralds, I'm not seeing improvisers really playing with each other. I see improvisers up here thinking, this is the first beat, this is the second, we've done this, now you've got to do this, now we've got to do this, and this has got to be. And that's a little bit of a different beast. It's following dance steps instead of being moved by the rhythm.
Yes.
Well said.
There can be the same problem with theater sports, for example. So theater sports has a structure. Yeah, there's teams, they challenge, there's scenes, there's scoring. But all of these elements are there to serve a purpose, and that purpose is to allow the players to take greater risks. And for the entertainment of the audience.
Yeah.
So the horn I talked about gets scenes off stage. The basket penalty is to protect you in case you happen to say something the audience thinks is offensive. Let's give you a penalty. Yeah. Then the audience goes, great, you've got control of the show. And they forgive that improviser for that moment of discretion. Because one night an audience might be fine with you saying a not too severe swear word, and another night an audience may not. Right? The challenges, you challenge to have variety in the show. So you're not challenging to the game you think you'll do great at. You're going, what does the show need now? And games were used for variety between the scenes, for rhythm and pacing. And if you had a long dramatic scene, let's do a 1 minute word at a time. Yeah. So it was actually about creating an evening of storytelling. But these are all the tools and the components that we play with. There isn't the first scene will be this, the second scene will be this, the third scene will be this. It's understand what we're trying to achieve, which is the audience feeling like they're at a sporting match. Learn how to play that so the audience has that experience. Creating stories and scenes of variety So what do we need to do that?
Mhm.
So you learn all of this underneath it. But I've seen a lot of theater sport shows that create such a rigid structure, it misses the point of why the show was formed in the first place. And then every week, the audience is seeing exactly the same thing. And we say impro happens once and it's gone. And then they come back the following week and see the same thing. And suddenly we're liars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it
Right.
also creates, as you say, some fear limitations on the students that are studying the, for example, the Harold. You know, oh, I forgot about this. Oh, I should have said this instead of that. And
Yeah. Where, I mean, what if you create something new? Right? I never met Dell, but my impression of him from people that have worked with him is that if he was watching a Herald, that someone did something outside of the Herald and suddenly a whole new thing was formed and it was organic and magical, I don't know if he'd complain that the Herald didn't happen. Right? I know for Keith, if something amazing appeared, he'd be like, wow, what was that? How did that happen? Like, you know, because we're still exploring as we're doing things. A lot of games and exercises have turned way too formulaic. So an example would be a foreign film dubbing.
Yeah.
Right? So you have people on stage speaking gibberish, people off stage that are translating.
Yes.
And at some point, someone's going to do a really long gibberish sentence and someone's going to say one word in English. And someone's good.
Yeah. Typical. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is gimmicks, tricks, shtick that has been done for 40 years.
Yes.
Now, using that for flavor, using that if it appears, using it in a corporate gig, I get it. But doing that every time you play the game, to the sacrifice of actually trying to tell the story or actually watch the offers your partner is making physically and emotionally, because the whole point of gibberish is to make us more physical and emotional. So if we've got all these verbal gimmicks that stop us from watching, the whole exercise and the reason for it is gone, and we're just playing a formulaic game to get 5 or 10 laughs.
Yes.
And we've missed the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that happens so much in the games, which, getting back to your point about short form, increases the stress of the students because they've learned that this game has to be played this way. Instead of 1 or 2 people are going to speak gibberish, 1 or 2 people are going to translate. Let's see what happens in the story.
Yeah. We have to focus on the storytelling.
Yeah. And how do we understand the communication? And what assumptions will we make? If you're repeating yourself, or if the structure prevents exploration or impulse
Yes.
or risk, that's when it becomes problematic. You can create structures that are like spine, like a spine of a scene or elements. But as long as there's freedom within that, then like a lot of genre shows immediately have some structure. If you're doing Jane Austen, you've got the structure of what is known as a Jane Austen.
yeah.
But you've still got the freedom of how you tell that.
Yeah, storytelling and genre improv is also very, very special. I mean, there is a good way to tell good stories. I mean, we do it already for thousands of years. So stories with plot points, for example, so they will come back eventually, but how to get there, if you do that totally free, that gives a lot of satisfaction also for the improvisers. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you become, like if you're doing a genre, become fascinated and curious, become obsessed with the genre.
Yeah.
Just allow yourself to read everything and watch everything, because then you start going, Jane Austen isn't just about wearing costumes and who's in love with who. What was going on in society?
Yeah.
How did that influence people? Right? It meant a lot if you were not included in society. That that had a different emotional weight to what it has now.
Yeah.
Right? Although we could probably parallel it to social media, and if you don't get enough likes, the anxiety, there'd be a comparison, right? But many people, when they're doing genre, they don't think, what is this story communicating? Or what is the heart of this story? What's the point of this genre?
Yes.
And I would love to see at international festivals people bringing genres from their own countries.
Yeah.
I see so many countries doing Shakespeare and Jane Austen, and I go, great, wonderful stories, well-known authors, but who are yours?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And if someone says, oh, well, people aren't going to know, insert author of your country, I go, what a great chance to tell them.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it will be a story and it can appeal to everyone. Yeah. Even if
Yes.
they don't know the genre of your story. Yeah.
Which makes me go, people are not picking genres to tell the story. They're picking genres that they can do the shtick.
Yeah.
So they're relying on the audience knowing the shtick of the these, thous, and those. Because if you rely on the story, you could do any author from any country, because the audience will go, right, wow, what's happening here? Who are these people? What's this feeling?
Yeah.
That would be exciting.
For sure it is.
Yeah, I'd love to know more about, Belgian authors.
Yeah.
Who's a great Belgian playwright?
The typical authors like from the past, like Felix Timmermans, they talk about the life on the land, the farmers, and it's usually, well, not always, but a little bit of a depressive stories. So, yeah, really. So that would be something I would just think about it, but
Yes.
it's something to do a lot of research in and to grasp the core of that particular genre and then put it on stage with a troupe. Yeah, it's
Absolutely. And there's a cultural assumption that, so for example, I remember being at an international festival in Europe and doing a Canadian prairie drama. And we never once thought, I wonder if the audience will understand this. There was a little bit of a cultural assumption that Canadian or American or British norms would just be accepted.
yeah,
But what's the difference between a Canadian prairie drama, which is on the land, sometimes very depressive, and what you've just mentioned?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
The big difference is the improviser, me going, I think I have the right to share this, with the assumption that people would be interested in Canadian culture. And maybe other people are going, oh, people don't know my culture. Good, teach us.
Well, Patti, that was great. Great that you told us all about these Harolds and all these structures. Um, so we thank you very much for being with us.
It's my pleasure. And I think, any group, if you're playing a structure, great. Break the structure, reform the structure, put it into different pieces. Look at it like Lego blocks. And maybe you're making a tree one day and maybe the next day it's a boat. Do that and then decide what it is that you want to do.
great. Thank you so much for being with us, Patty.
Thank you.
Bye.